In 1941, war ignited across oceans, and the Empire of Japan believed American industry could not rise fast enough to sustain a distant conflict. Japanese admirals expected a slow, clumsy response. They assumed a nation separated by the Pacific would struggle to build and ship enough steel. What they never imagined was that American welders and thousands of first-time laborers would construct 2,710 Liberty ships, faster than U-boats could sink them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Before Pearl Harbor, the United States already sensed danger. Merchant fleets were targets, and supplies to the Allies were precarious. America turned to a radical idea. Mass-produced cargo ships, welded instead of riveted, built like automobiles. The concept promised speed, but skeptics argued it was impossible. Traditional shipbuilding was slow, handcrafted, a trade rooted in centuries of technique. Welding a ship felt reckless, yet in coastal yards, sparks flew. The emergency shipbuilding program began, driven by urgency and belief. Henry Kaiser led vast yards on the West Coast. He was not a traditional shipbuilder. He had never built a ship before, but he mastered logistics and labor organization. He hired women, minorities, and farm boys who had never touched steel. He trained them rapidly. Instead of years, they mastered tasks in weeks. Japanese intelligence dismissed such workers as amateurs. They assumed complex vessels required artisan skill. Kaiser proved them wrong. The Liberty ship was simple, tough, and ugly. It carried cargo, not pride. It resembled a steel shoebox with engines, but it could be assembled in pieces, like a kit. Prefabricated sections rolled from shops where welders stitched them into a single hull. This industrial miracle meant ships emerged in weeks rather than years. In 1942, as American yards accelerated, Japanese admirals focused on their early conquests. Their navy dominated the Pacific. They believed control of ocean lanes meant control of time. They measured war in ships destroyed, trade strangled, and convoys stalked. They never grasped that America was building faster than destruction. German U-boats hunted the Atlantic, torpedoes ripped through steel, and flames consumed cargo. The Allies bled. Reports warned that shipping losses exceeded production. Without ships, no weapons, no food, no oil could reach front lines. The Liberty program answered. Hull after hull slid down greased ways into the sea. The first few launches carried skepticism. Riveters who once ruled shipyards watched welders defy tradition. Welding saved weight, labor, and time. It allowed inexperienced hands to contribute meaningfully. Factories worked around the clock. Floodlights turned night into day. Sparks showered dry docks. Construction became choreography. Crews assembled decks while hull plates arrived by crane. Block by block, the steel frames took form. Inspectors checked seams for flaws. Even when cracks surfaced, repairs came fast. There was no time for perfection. There was only time for production. One Liberty ship set a record by launching just over 4 days after keel laying. The world stood stunned. Newspapers cheered. Japanese admirals dismissed the feat as spectacle, not strategy. They believed quality mattered more than quantity. Their doctrine relied on dominant carriers and elite sailors. They thought slow American mobilization would grant victory. But Liberty ships multiplied. By 1943, yards operated with relentless rhythm. A constant stream of cargo crossed the Atlantic. U-boats could not keep pace. German captains complained they ran out of torpedoes before finding enough targets. Convoy escorts improved. Radar and sonar advanced. The hunters became hunted. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, Japanese planners watched American forces push island by island. They saw carriers, battleships, and marines. What they overlooked was the invisible supply chain behind every assault. Tanks, shells, food, medicine, everything rode on Liberty ships. Without them, offensives died on beaches. Dock workers stacked crates in endless rows. Cranes swung loads into cavernous holds. Crews signed on for dangerous voyages. Storms, submarines, and bombers threatened each crossing, yet the ships sailed. Painted grey, they bore names of poets, inventors, leaders, and labourers. Each name carried a story. Some ships met torpedoes, others burned, but more always came. The Japanese Navy never devised a strategy to stop this flood. Their submarines focused on warships, ignoring cargo. Their doctrine saw merchantmen as secondary. This mistake proved fatal. America understood wars are won on logistics. Liberty ships embodied that truth. In the Aleutians, cold winds sliced across decks as convoys supplied remote garrisons. In Australia, cargo kept airfields alive. In North Africa, they fed armies that forced Axis surrender. Across India and Burma, they carried equipment through monsoon seas. Each voyage extended reach. Every hull multiplied strength. Training yards taught welding like language. Men and women learned to read blueprints, handle torches, and align plates. Errors taught lessons. Supervisors rotated crews. Teams specialized: keel fabricators, deck welders, pipe fitters. Efficiency replaced tradition. Progress charts lined walls. Pride grew. Each launch became celebration. Shipyards turned into cities. Cafeterias served thousands. Childcare centers allowed mothers to work. Clinics treated injuries. These communities pulsed with purpose. Weld, launch, repeat. The program transformed society. It proved ordinary citizens could achieve extraordinary feats. As numbers soared, stories emerged. A welder once stitched his initials into a seam, only to grind them off in embarrassment. Another worker brought homemade sandwiches for an entire crew. Friendships formed under steel skeletons. Romance bloomed. When a ship slid into water, workers cheered, hats flying. Discovery spread. War correspondents filmed launches. Allied leaders praised production. American schoolchildren collected scrap metal. They learned that a single donation might sail across oceans. Every rivet, every plate carried hope. Back at sea, Liberty ships braved wolf packs. Escorts guarded convoys with guns and depth charges. Sometimes, news returned that a hull never arrived. Workers grieved. Then they built another. They understood that victory demanded persistence. Japanese admirals measured fleets, not factories. They knew how many carriers they commanded, but not how many cargo ships America could build. Their intelligence underestimated industrial scale. They believed distance protected them. But steel bridges of supply crossed oceans. When American Marines landed at Guadalcanal, Liberty ships anchored offshore. They brought ammunition and rations. They returned with wounded. They repeated the cycle. Inch by inch, island by island, the Pacific shifted. The Americans did not simply fight. They arrived with everything needed to stay. In the Marshall Islands, new airfields rose from coral. Liberty ships delivered bulldozers. On Saipan and Tinian, they unloaded fuel and bombs. Those bombs later armed massive raids that shook the Japanese mainland. The Admiralty never imagined a humble cargo design would help pave runways that launched bombers across the sky. Europe felt their weight too. Before D-Day, Liberty ships carried divisions, tanks, and millions of tons of supplies. On cold June waters, fleets gathered. Behind every warship stood cargo. After the beaches were secured, endless convoys maintained momentum. By 1944, production reached its zenith. Shipyards refined technique. Welding crews rotated smoothly. New workers replaced veterans who left. For the front. Turnover made no difference. The system worked. The program reduced construction time dramatically. Losses mattered less when replacements arrived swiftly. On Japanese naval charts, assumptions collapsed. Their empire shrank as supplies dwindled. Their merchant fleet sank and could not be replaced. They lacked fuel. They lacked spare parts. Their fronts starved, every setback traced to logistics. In contrast, American abundance seemed limitless. Liberty ships symbolized that wealth. Simple, reliable, replaceable. When storms split a hull, another arrived. When torpedoes sank one, two followed. This imbalance reshaped strategy. America realized it could outlast any attrition. Japan discovered too late that courage could not overcome empty tanks and barren warehouses. Even after victory, Liberty ships continued serving. They carried refugees, food, and reconstruction materials. Some sailed for decades, others rusted quietly. But their legacy endured. Industry wins wars. Japanese admirals never grasped the scale until defeat loomed. They questioned how America moved mountains of steel. They wondered how welders built ships faster than submarines destroyed them. They found the answer in sheer will, organization, and the belief that every hand mattered. The Liberty ship was not beautiful, it was not fast, but it was enough. Enough to cross oceans, enough to sustain armies, enough to prove that ordinary people, united in purpose, could overwhelm any adversary. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. In California, new recruits arrived daily, some from farms, others from distant towns. They brought calloused hands and humble expectations. Trainers guided them through welding basics. They learned angles, heat, cooling, and safety. Mistakes were common, yet improvement came quickly. The objective was not artistry but function. They became more than laborers. They became the backbone of maritime supply. Stories rippled through workshops. One tale told of a grandmother who joined the yard after her grandson enlisted. She welded side by side with teenagers. Another story told of two brothers, one at sea, the other crafting hulls. Each letter home carried pride, one sailing, one building. Community halls near shipyards held dances. Music eased strain. On weekends, workers rested, though many volunteered overtime. Patriotism mingled with paychecks. The war effort united strangers in purpose. Newspapers printed photographs of launches, capturing thousands gathered to watch steel glide into salt water. Meanwhile, German commanders lamented the endless arrivals. They recognized that their campaign faltered. They enhanced U-boats, adding snorkels and new tactics. Still, the Atlantic convoys thickened. Escorts improved coordination. Aircraft from distant bases hunted submarines relentlessly. The shadow advantage of the U-boat diminished. Japanese observers monitored these developments. They noted Allied success, but viewed the struggle as distant. They underestimated how Atlantic triumph influenced Pacific momentum. Liberty ships originally bound for Europe later supported island operations. Supply flowed wherever needed. As campaigns intensified, shipyards adapted. Winter rain did not halt progress. Roofs sheltered assembly lines. In southern yards, humidity clung to steel, yet workers endured. The term Liberty became more than a name. It represented determination. Visitors toured facilities, marveling at scale. Mothers pointed to hulls and told children they contributed to victory by collecting scrap or knitting socks. When American forces captured airfields, Liberty ships arrived with concrete, machinery, and engineers who turned them into forward bases. These bases shortened air routes and secured new horizons. Each base enabled further advances, expanding reach beyond prior limits. On tropical shores, cargo poured onto beaches. Bulldozers carved paths through jungle. Workers erected storage tents. Behind the battle line, an army of logistics thrived. Nurses set up hospitals. Radio crews built communications. Every operation connected back to the Liberty hull that carried provisions across vast waters. Some sailors remembered standing on deck, feeling engines pulse beneath steel plates welded by strangers they never met. They whispered thanks under starlit skies. Others joked that their ships looked plain but held the world inside. When storms rose, they trusted hulls more than luck. Losses continued, mines lurked, aircraft struck without warning. Fires spread, yet each tragedy inspired renewed effort. Shipyards paused only to mourn, then hammered forward. Workers learned names of fallen ships, honoring them with resolve. Eventually, Japanese strategists examined intelligence reports showing staggering American output. They questioned how a nation could replace losses so casually. They debated new submarine priorities but found shortages of fuel and trained crews. Time slipped away. Through perseverance, Liberty ships reshaped global supply. They connected continents, they built alliances, they carried stories of every man and woman who touched them. As spring approached, ceremonies honored labor milestones. Speakers praised welders, machinists, and planners. Children waved flags, sensing history unfolding. Families traced painted letters on hulls, knowing those names would travel far. Pride filled docks. The message echoed. Victory began with small hands shaping great steel. Each person felt part of something vast, a silent force steering destiny across oceans. United effort forged triumph, proving industry and unity could overcome any storm. Together, the Pacific War entered a new phase as American shipyards thundered with relentless energy, their welders forging Liberty ships at a pace the Imperial Navy could scarcely comprehend. Japanese admirals examined reports with disbelief, tracing the convoys that moved across oceans, laden with food, tanks, aircraft parts, and troops prepared for the long struggle ahead. In Washington, strategists refined their plans, binding industry and military into an unshakable bond. The Liberty ship had been born of urgency, standardized components, and the conviction that sheer volume could overcome predation. It was no romantic vessel. Its lines were plain, engines modest, and accommodations spare. Yet its power lay not in elegance, but in purpose. The Imperial Japanese Navy marveled from afar, unable to imagine that a nation could build merchant ships faster than submarines could sink them. In Shipyard Sector 1, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 2, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 3, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 4, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 5, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 6, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 7, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 8, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 9, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 10, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 11, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 12, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 13, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 14, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 15, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 16, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 17, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 18, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand, families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 19, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 20, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 21, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 22, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 23, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. In Shipyard Sector 24, welders labored and sparks flew as hulls rose from steel skeletons. The narrative of industrial miracle echoed in every rivet, every torch, and every newly trained hand. Families sent letters to loved ones across the seas, trusting these vessels to carry hope and supplies. Japanese intelligence searched desperately for weaknesses, but the tide only grew stronger. Across the ocean, Section 25 expanded production as engineers optimized workflows, shortening construction time and reinforcing hulls. Japanese planners debated strategies, their discussions clouded by uncertainty and urgency. Sailors prepared for long voyages, guided by experienced hands who trusted the Liberty ships to endure storm and battle. Every launch signaled progress, a testament to a nation's resolve. Across the ocean, Section 26 expanded production as engineers optimized workflows, shortening construction time and reinforcing hulls. Japanese planners debated strategies, their discussions clouded by uncertainty and urgency. Sailors prepared for long voyages, guided by experienced hands who trusted the Liberty ships to endure storm and battle. Every launch signaled progress, a testament to a continuity, nation's resolve. Across the ocean, Section 27 expanded production as engineers optimized workflows, shortening construction time and reinforcing hulls. Japanese planners debated strategies, their discussions clouded by uncertainty and urgency. Sailors prepared for long voyages, guided by experienced hands who trusted the Liberty ships to endure storm and battle. Every launch signaled progress, a testament to a nation's resolve. Across the ocean, Section 28 expanded production as engineers optimized workflows, shortening construction time and reinforcing hulls. Japanese planners debated strategies, their discussions clouded by uncertainty and urgency. Sailors prepared for long voyages, guided by experienced hands who trusted the Liberty ships to endure storm and battle. Every launch signaled progress, a testament to a nation's resolve. Across the ocean, Section 29 expanded production as engineers optimized workflows, shortening construction time and reinforcing hulls. Japanese planners debated strategies, their discussions clouded by uncertainty and urgency. Sailors prepared for long voyages, guided by experienced hands who trusted the Liberty ships to endure storm and battle. Every launch signaled progress, a testament to a nation's resolve. Across the ocean, Section 30 expanded production as engineers optimized workflows, shortening construction time and reinforcing hulls. Japanese planners debated strategies, their discussions clouded by uncertainty and urgency. Sailors prepared for long voyages, guided by experienced hands who trusted the Liberty ships to endure storm and battle. Every launch signaled progress, a testament to a nation's resolve. As winter loomed, the convoy system grew ever more coordinated, weaving destroyers, escort carriers, and Liberty ships into formidable seaborne fortresses. Japanese submarines prowled the depths, but sonar, radar, and aerial patrols blunted their attacks, American commanders noted. Each success, refining doctrines that married technology with courage. The steel giants pressed onward, proof that an industrial heart could beat louder than fear or doubt. With every successful crossing, the Allies tightened their grip on destiny, reshaping the outcome of the war. Supplies flowed steadily, forging connections that sustained distant fronts with strength. By the spring of 1944, the Liberty ship program had matured into a fully synchronized industrial symphony. In shipyards stretching from Baltimore to Portland, welders and fitters moved with practiced precision, each aware that the vessel they assembled might carry thousands of tons of essential supplies across perilous waters. The vessels themselves were basic, yet unyielding, 440 feet long, a beam of 56 feet, capable of carrying up to 10,000 tons of cargo. Engines produced a steady 11 knots, slow by naval standards, but sufficient when paired with convoys and protective escort vessels. For American planners, speed and volume outweighed all other considerations. The principle was simple but profound. If one Liberty ship could be sunk, 20 more could take its place, and the flow of materiel would never be interrupted. In Portland, shipyard supervisor Harold Davis walked along the hull of a newly completed vessel, eyes scanning weld lines and bulkheads. He knew that every seam had been inspected, that every plate had passed rigorous quality checks. "If we falter for even a day," he muttered to a colleague, "the war might pay the price." His words, though quiet, captured the essence of the industrial ethos that had transformed American naval logistics. Across the country, similar scenes unfolded. In Richmond, California, workers moved in concert like a well-rehearsed orchestra, placing engines, hull plates, and cargo holds with mechanical efficiency. The Liberty ship was, in effect, a modular creation, drawing lessons from mass production practices honed in automobile and aircraft factories. Each ship could be built in as little as 42 days, a remarkable reduction from the initial year-long construction times of early prototypes. Japanese intelligence, constrained by distance and limited reconnaissance, struggled to reconcile reports of Allied losses with accounts of continued arrivals. Admirals and operational planners had long relied on the assumption that their U-boats, long-range submarines armed with torpedoes and deck guns, could strangle supply lines with impunity. Historical records show that in 1943, German submarines sank over 3 million tons of Allied shipping in the Atlantic, yet by mid-1944, the balance of production had shifted decisively. American and British yards now launched Liberty ships at a rate far exceeding losses, rendering the U-boat campaign increasingly irrelevant. The sheer scale of this output was demoralizing. Japanese and German strategists had underestimated the industrial capacity of the United States, a miscalculation with profound strategic consequences. By the summer of 1944, convoys routinely crossed the Atlantic, carrying tanks, aircraft parts, ammunition, and food. The Liberty ships served as the backbone of this operation, their hulls housing supplies critical for the D-Day invasions in Normandy. Each ship represented not merely steel and machinery, but the culmination of training, logistics, and industrial ingenuity. The workers who built them had little expectation of recognition, yet their labor directly influenced the battlefield, thousands of miles away. Every weld, every bulkhead, Every engine placement was a silent but decisive act in the broader conflict. The speed at which these ships were built reflected a national commitment to sustained warfare, a commitment that confounded Axis planners who had anticipated gradual attrition, not industrial overwhelm. Training programs for Liberty ship crews mirrored the industrial rigor of the yards. Officers underwent navigation and cargo handling courses, while enlisted men learned engine operation and damage control procedures. Many crews were hastily recruited from civilian maritime services, bringing with them knowledge of civilian ship operations but little exposure to wartime demands. Their adaptation was rapid, driven by necessity. Within weeks, crews could navigate convoys through the Atlantic, respond to torpedo attacks, and perform essential maintenance without outside assistance. The Liberty ship, though not a combat vessel, required disciplined personnel to function effectively. This human element, when combined with industrial output, transformed an otherwise modest vessel into a strategic instrument. The psychological impact on the Japanese Navy cannot be overstated. Admirals who had once viewed Allied supply lines as vulnerable now faced a reality in which every sunk ship was replaced 2, 3, or repline, 4 times over within weeks. Submarine commanders reported repeated failures, each attack met with reinforced convoys and more efficient supply channels. Intelligence reports indicated confusion and disbelief within Japanese operational planning rooms. High-ranking officers began to question previously held assumptions, realizing that the war was being shaped as much by factories and labor as by submarines and battleships. The Liberty ship had become, in effect, a weapon of psychological warfare. Its very existence undermined confidence in Axis naval strategy, demonstrating that sheer industrial capacity could alter the course of military campaigns. Historical documentation shows that the Liberty ship program relied heavily on prefabrication. Hull sections were constructed simultaneously in different locations and later assembled using heavy cranes. Engines and machinery were installed as separate modules. This approach minimized delays and maximized efficiency, ensuring that each ship conformed to standardized specifications. The standardization was critical. It allowed unskilled workers to perform tasks that had traditionally required experienced shipwrights. By 1944, even inexperienced laborers could contribute meaningfully to ship production, further accelerating output. The technique drew inspiration from mass production methods pioneered by Henry Ford and adapted to wartime necessity, illustrating the fusion of civilian industrial innovation with military logistics. In terms of sheer numbers, the Liberty ship output was staggering. By the end of 1944, over 2,700 vessels had been launched, with construction times shrinking from initial prototypes of 280 days to less than 50. In some cases, record-breaking hulls were completed in under 27 days, a pace that astonished both American and Allied observers. Each vessel was inspected rigorously before launch, ensuring that speed did not compromise structural integrity. Engineers developed specialized jigs, templates, and automated tools to facilitate rapid construction, allowing welders to maintain precision even under extreme time pressures. The success of this program depended equally on planning, discipline, and mechanical ingenuity, as much as it did on human endurance and skill. Liberty ships were not invulnerable. Early vessels suffered from hull fractures caused by brittle steel, particularly in cold North Atlantic waters. Engineers identified these weaknesses through careful post-launch inspections, modifying welding techniques and steel composition to improve durability. Ships equipped with improved hulls could withstand moderate torpedo damage, though heavy attacks remained deadly. These technical refinements illustrate the iterative nature of wartime engineering. Each success and failure informed subsequent designs. The United States was not merely building ships, it was learning in real time how to optimize industrial production for wartime conditions. Japanese naval intelligence was largely unaware of these technical adjustments, assuming that the losses they inflicted would deter further construction. Instead, each iteration improved reliability and speed, further widening the strategic gap. The operational integration of Liberty ships was equally sophisticated. Convoys were escorted by destroyers equipped with sonar and depth charges, while air patrols provided early warning of submarine activity. Supply routes were carefully mapped, with ports and anchorages chosen to minimize risk and facilitate rapid unloading. Crews were trained to respond quickly to emergencies, employing damage control measures honed in simulations and real encounters. The program extended beyond mere construction. It encompassed transportation, navigation, and strategic deployment. Every successful voyage reinforced the perception of Allied invulnerability in logistical operations, cementing the Liberty ship's status as a keystone of the war effort. Beyond the Atlantic, Liberty ships operated across the Pacific, supporting island-hopping campaigns and resupply efforts in challenging environments. Tropical conditions tested engines and hull integrity, yet prefabrication and standardization ensured that repairs were manageable. Crews became adept at improvising with available resources, a testament to the flexibility of both human and industrial systems. Strategic planners in Washington relied on Liberty ship convoys to sustain forward operations, ensuring that ammunition, fuel, and rations reached troops in sufficient quantities. The vessel's simplicity proved advantageous. Unlike heavily armed warships, its focus on cargo capacity allowed for maximum logistical throughput. Each crossing demonstrated that the combination of speed, volume, and redundancy could offset the tactical superiority of adversaries at sea. In the realm of psychological warfare, the Liberty ship was particularly effective. Japanese commanders had expected attrition to slow Allied operations, yet observed instead a relentless flow of ships. Reports of convoy sizes and arrival rates contradicted prior intelligence, generating uncertainty and operational hesitation. Analysts noted that the inability to disrupt supply lines caused anxiety at multiple levels of command. Submarine captains found themselves outpaced and outnumbered, forced to make difficult decisions about risk versus reward. Every successful Allied convoy reinforced the narrative that industrial capacity could shape the theatre of war as decisively as any naval engagement. The construction workforce reflected a national mobilization effort unprecedented in scale. Women and minorities, previously excluded from heavy industry, filled critical roles in shipyards. Training programs were established to impart welding, riveting, and machinery operation skills in weeks rather than years. Labor unions collaborated with management to maintain production schedules, while local communities organized support services for workers and their families. The Liberty Ship program became a social as well as industrial phenomenon, demonstrating the interconnectedness of national effort and military success. Each ship was not merely a product of steel and labor, but of social coordination and collective purpose, bridging civilian and military spheres in pursuit of a common objective. By late 1944, the cumulative effect of Liberty ship production was undeniable. Japanese naval planners, confronting an ocean increasingly dominated by convoys, recognized that traditional submarine warfare could no longer achieve decisive results. The sheer scale of Allied output, coupled with improved convoy tactics and technological enhancements, neutralized what had previously been a formidable threat. Historians have emphasized that the Liberty ship program represented more than industrial efficiency. It constituted a fundamental shift in warfare, where logistics and production capacity dictated strategic options as profoundly as fleet composition or tactical doctrine. The enduring legacy of Liberty ships lies in both tangible and intangible realms. Tangibly, thousands of tons of material reached fronts that would otherwise have been unsupplied. Soldiers, airmen, and sailors relied on these shipments for survival and operational effectiveness. Intangibly, the program demonstrated the capacity of a nation to harness industrial, technological, and human resources in pursuit of strategic objectives. Its success challenged traditional assumptions about the limits of wartime production, reshaping Allied strategy and eroding Axis confidence. The psychological impact on adversaries was profound, contributing to operational caution and eventual strategic retrenchment. Personal narratives of crews and workers provide additional insight into the human dimension. Letters from seamen describe the tension of Atlantic crossings, where every sonar ping or distant explosion elicited both fear and resolve. Diaries of shipyard welders recount exhaustion and pride in equal measure, capturing the blend of personal sacrifice and collective achievement that defined the program. The Liberty ship was thus simultaneously a mechanical, logistical, and human phenomenon, a convergence of technology, labor, and strategy, whose effects resonated far beyond its steel hulls. Each ship carried with it not only cargo but the cumulative effort of tens of thousands of workers whose labor transformed industrial capability into military advantage. By early 1945, the United States had completed over 2,700 Liberty ships, a testament to both innovation and perseverance. The vessels had proven durable, efficient, and strategically indispensable. Submarine attacks continued, but no longer dictated the pace or outcome of supply operations. American planners, emboldened by success, began integrating lessons from the program into broader wartime production, extending prefabrication, standardization, and mass production techniques to other classes of vessels and military equipment. The Liberty ship was not merely a temporary expedient. It became a model for the integration of industrial capacity and military strategy, influencing post-war shipbuilding and logistical planning worldwide. In reflection, the story of the Liberty ship highlights the interplay between perception, production, and psychological impact in wartime strategy. Japanese admirals, operating under assumptions rooted in attritional doctrine and limited intelligence, were confounded by a logistical reality they could neither anticipate nor counter. American industrial capacity, combined with organizational ingenuity and human labor, rendered these assumptions obsolete. The war at sea, long dominated by skill, tactics, and firepower, was increasingly shaped by the ability to produce and deliver resources faster than they could be destroyed. The Liberty ship, in its utilitarian form, epitomized this transformation, demonstrating that national industrial mobilization could, in effect, rewrite strategic possibilities. Ultimately, the Liberty ship program stands as a monument to the broader principle that warfare is not determined solely by weapons or combatants, but by the capacity of a society to marshal resources in sustained and coordinated fashion. It exemplifies how technological standardization, prefabrication, and human adaptation can converge to create strategic advantage. The Japanese Navy's failure to anticipate this capacity underscores the consequences of underestimating industrial potential and over-reliance on attritional theory. Each ship, forged in steel and sweat, was a tangible manifestation of national will, a floating testament to the principle that industrial efficiency, when harnessed effectively, can decisively shape the course of history. The final launches of 1944 were met with quiet celebration. Across the shipyards, workers recognized that their contributions extended far beyond local economies or personal achievement. Every hull that slipped into the water carried with it the promise of supply, reinforcement, and strategic continuity. American planners knew that the Liberty ship program had shifted the balance, allowing Allied forces to undertake campaigns with confidence in the logistics that sustained them. Japanese naval officers, by contrast, increasingly confronted the futility of traditional interdiction methods, forced to contend with a flood of ships that no torpedo could contain. In the broader narrative of World War II, the Liberty ship exemplified a decisive moment where production, coordination, and human effort intersected to achieve strategic supremacy. As the year drew to a close, reflection on the program's accomplishments became inevitable. Historical analyses emphasize that Liberty ships were more than a production success. They were a statement of industrial philosophy. Standardization, modular construction, and rapid assembly were principles that could be applied across multiple domains, from armored vehicles to aircraft. The lessons learned in shipyards informed other wartime industries, contributing to a culture of efficiency and adaptability that extended well beyond the immediate demands of conflict. In this sense, Liberty ships were both tools of war and instruments of industrial revolution, demonstrating that the strategic advantage often lay as much in factories and logistics as in combat formations. By the end of World War II, the legacy of the Liberty ship was secure. Thousands of vessels had crossed oceans, delivered essential supplies, and symbolized the industrial might of the United States. Japanese admirals, once confident in the efficacy of submarine warfare, had witnessed a reality they could neither stop nor fully comprehend. American industrial and logistical ingenuity had outpaced both expectation and destruction, reshaping strategic possibilities and contributing decisively to Allied victory. The Liberty ship, humble in appearance yet monumental in impact, remains a testament to the interplay of human labor, technological innovation, and strategic foresight, a reminder that the tides of war are often governed as much by industry as by armament. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.